Hi, my name is Seth, and welcome to our final session of part 1, where we've been discussing pitch. Today we're going to be talking about intervals. An interval in music terms is the distance between two notes. They are identified numerically and are numbered similar to the scale degrees. If we look at C major, the interval between C and D is a second, consisting of two semitones. The interval between C and E is a third, consisting of four semitones. The interval between C and F is a fourth, consisting of five semitones. The interval between C and G is a fifth, consisting of seven semitones. The interval between C and A is a sixth, consisting of nine semitones. The interval between C and B is a seventh, consisting of 11 semitones. Intervals 1, 4, 5, and 8 are better known as perfect intervals, while intervals 2, 3, 6, and 7 are called major intervals. Let's say we have two notes, F and B flat above it. First, we're going to count the note names to determine the interval. F, G, A, B. That's 4. So we know this is a fourth. Next, we're going to see if B flat is in the scale of F major. So going to your major scale chart, have a look and you will see that B flat is in the key of F major. This interval is therefore a perfect fourth. If we have G at the bottom and F sharp at the top, we're going to count and we'll see G, A, B, C, D, E, F, 7 notes. Going to your major scale chart, you'll see that F sharp is in the key of G. This interval is a major seventh. If we have C sharp at the bottom, G sharp at the top, let's count the note names. C, D, E, F, G, that's 5. We know this interval is a fifth. Let's quickly look on our major scale chart to see if G sharp is a note in C sharp major. You'll see it is. Therefore, this interval is a perfect fifth. If we have E flat at the bottom, G at the top, we're going to count the note names E, F, G, 1, 2, 3. So it's a third. Going to your major scale chord chart, you'll see G is a note in the scale of E flat. It is therefore a major third interval. Your interval always works from the bottom note to the top, unless told to invert. When the top note of a major interval is lowered by a half step, that interval becomes a minor interval. When the top note of a minor or perfect interval is lowered by half a step, it becomes a diminished interval. Here is a symbol for diminished. When the top note of either a major or perfect interval is raised by half a step, it becomes augmented. The symbol used is a plus sign. Let's look at a few examples. If we have two notes, D and A flat, the first thing we're going to do is count the note names. D, E, F, G, A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this interval is a fifth. Let's go to our major scale chart and you will see that D major only has F sharp and C sharp in it. A is a natural in the key of D major. Going back to the interval, you're going to see that A is an A flat. So here we can see that a perfect interval has been lowered by half a step. This interval is therefore a diminished fifth. If we have C and E flat, we're going to first count the note names, which is C, D, E, 1, 2, 3. This interval is a third. Now we're going to go to the major scale chart and you will see that there are no flats or sharps in the key of C major. Therefore, E is a natural in C major. Here, the top note has been lowered by half a step. This interval is therefore a minor third. If we have C and A double flat, we count the note names C, D, E, F, G, A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This interval is a sixth. We know from the previous example that there is no sharps or flat in the key of C major. Therefore, C to A is a major sixth. If we were to lower that A by half a step to A flat, it would be a minor sixth. If we lower that flat again to a double flat, it becomes a diminished sixth. If we have E and B sharp, we're going to count the note names, E, F, G, A, B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This interval is a fifth. Going to your chord chart, you will see that in the key of E major, there is a F sharp, G sharp, C sharp, and D sharp. B is a natural in the key of E major. Here, the B has been raised by half a step. This interval is therefore an augmented fifth. Previously, I said that intervals are determined from the bottom note to the top unless inverted. The best way to explain the inversion of intervals is to have a look at examples. Before we get to the examples, remember this. Perfect intervals that get inverted remain perfect. Major intervals that get inverted become minor and vice versa. Augmented intervals that get inverted become diminished and vice versa. You also need to bear in mind that when you invert an interval of a second, it becomes a seventh and vice versa. When you invert an interval of a third, it becomes a sixth and vice versa. And when you invert an interval of a fourth, it becomes a fifth and vice versa. All you need to remember actually is just subtract the interval from 9 and that will give you its inversion. Now to the examples. If we have two notes, G and D, we know from previous examples that to determine this interval, we have to count the note names and refer to the major scale chart. You will see that this is a perfect fifth. To determine the inversion of this interval, we take the top note, which is the D, and drop it down an octave. This is now the bottom note of the interval. And now we just recalculate the interval by counting the note names D, E, F, G, it's our fourth, and referring to the major scale chart, where you will see that this is now a perfect fourth. So what happened here? Like I said, perfect remains perfect. And to determine the inverse interval of a fifth, we just subtract it from 9, giving us 4. If we have two notes, A and C, by counting the note names and referring to the major scale chart, you're going to see that this is a minor third interval. In the beginning, I mentioned that a major interval inverted becomes minor and vice versa. Also, that an interval of a third inverted will become a sixth. So if this is a minor third, this interval inverted will become a major sixth. Let's test it. If I take the top note C and drop it down an octave, this becomes the bottom note. We recalculate the interval by counting the notes and referring to the major scale chart. You will see that this is now a major sixth interval. Last example, if we have two notes C and F sharp, we count the note names and refer to the major scale chart. You will see that this is an augmented fourth. The F has been raised by a half step. I also mentioned earlier that augmented becomes diminished when inverted and diminished becomes augmented. Also that fourth becomes a fifth and a fifth becomes a fourth. So therefore, this augmented fourth, when inverted, should become a diminished fifth. Let's quickly test it. Let's take the top note, F sharp, drop it down an octave. This is now the bottom note of the interval. We're going to count the note names now, F, G, A, B, C. It's a fifth. Also, by going to the major scale chart, you will see that C sharp is in the key of F sharp major. The C sharp has been lowered by half a step to C. This has been diminished. So this interval is a diminished fifth. So the inverse of an augmented fourth is a diminished fifth. This technique of determining inversions is very helpful when you are required to determine an interval when you are just given a top note. Let's say I give you the note B and I say that this is the top note of an augmented fifth interval. Now you need to determine what is the bottom note. Well, from our previous examples, we know that an augmented becomes a diminished and an interval of a fifth becomes a fourth. 9 minus 5 equals 4. So therefore, an augmented fifth, when inverted, becomes a diminished fourth. Now let's determine a diminished fourth above B. Well, we count the note names, B, C, D, E, so we know it's an E. Let's quickly go to our major chord chart and you will see that in the key of B, E is a natural. So what we want to do now is diminish that interval by lowering the top note by half a step. Remember, perfect intervals when lowered by half a step become diminished. So now we have formed a diminished fourth from B to E flat. Now to make B the top note, we take the E flat, drop it down an octave, and there you have your augmented fifth. When an interval is greater than an octave, it is called a compound interval. Compound intervals have the same characteristics as their relative octave intervals and are determined the same way you would with intervals less than an octave. You would count the note names and refer to the major scale chart. Let's say we have a major second interval. If we raise the top note by an octave to a ninth or even to a 16th, it will remain a major interval. A perfect fourth is the same as a perfect 11th or 18th. A diminished fifth is the same as a diminished 12th or 19th. This is one last thing I'd like to talk about, and that is enharmonics in intervals. To illustrate this, I'm going to give you two intervals. The one is D and F sharp being the top note, and the other one D and G flat being the top note. If you look on the keyboard, you will see that these two intervals sound the same, but it's the note names that define the interval. If the top note is F sharp, then this interval is a major third. If it is G flat, then it is a diminished fourth. By just simply counting the note names and see how that note fits in with the major scale, you'll be able to define the interval. This now concludes this section of pitch. In the next part, we're going to be discussing rhythm.